My next guest is David McCormick, who served in several high-level roles in the George W. Bush administration, including Undersecretary for International Affairs in the Treasury Department. He then helped run Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, as CEO. Last year, McCormick ran for Senate in Pennsylvania, but lost narrowly in the Republican primary after Donald Trump endorsed his opponent, Mehmet Oz. Now, McCormick has a new book out on strengthening America and competing with China. It is called Superpower in Peril, a battle plan to renew America. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be with you, Fareed.
So I think you can help answer this question that I've wondered about, which is the United States does a huge amount of trade with China. It's about $700 billion now. And I know that a lot of CEOs who run companies are wondering, they export a lot to China. China buys huge amounts of American agricultural goods. Walmart uses China to stock much of its stores. They're wondering, when they hear all the rhetoric, the anti-China rhetoric, the tensions, what are we supposed to do? Are we not supposed to be trading with China? Are we not supposed to be in this economic relationship with them?
Well, China and the United States, as you know, are the two largest economies in the world. But I do think we have a reckoning that's taking place in the United States, and there's a bipartisan consensus that we become highly dependent on China and that we need to take steps to treat China as the adversary that it is. And so from an economic perspective, I think what that means is we need to strategically decouple those industries that are so critical to America's security and economic vitality, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals. We become unbelievably dependent on global supply chains, and particularly as it relates to China. Second, we need to put investment restrictions in place that stop venture capital firms in the Silicon Valley from investing in artificial intelligence companies that work with the Chinese military or the Chinese Communist Party. That's madness, given that we believe, or I believe at least, that China is an adversary. The third thing we need to do is be much more proactive about creating the right kinds of alliances to check China's aggression, its aggression in geopolitical terms around the globe, and we can talk more about that. But that's the kind of, that doesn't mean 100% decoupling. When I was on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania, I'd go into one place, a manufacturing plant, and they say, listen, you know, China, the globalization's killing us, China's killing us, we've got to stop the trade. And I'd go to another, and it was a Harley-Davidson supplier, and they'd say, wait a second, China's a big market for Harley-Davidsons. So I think there's trade and investment that we can continue to have with China. It just can't be strategic in a way that undermines U.S. interest.
So what you described, David, strikes me as a very sensible strategic decoupling, investing in the United States, trying to make sure that you have restrictions on certain kinds of investments. It sounds like the Biden administration's China policy. So what is Joe Biden doing that what he seems to already be doing what you are advocating?
I don't think so. So on two fronts, the premise of my book, Superpower in Peril, is that we're in decline, but decline is a choice, and so is renewal. So we need to have an agenda to really deal with decline at home by educating our people, by confronting China, and really securing the country. And there's two pieces to the China strategy. One is go to the gym at home. And the way we do that is through reforming our education system, through technology policy that makes sure we remain continue to have leadership, and through ensuring that we protect our data. But then in terms of China, we need to reduce dramatically this dependence. And I don't think there's been a comprehensive whole of nation strategy for dealing with the adversary that China is.
But when I look at Biden, largest investments in science and technology in a generation, curbs on high technology for China, new reviews on investment, it all seems to be very similar.
It is similar in wording, but I don't think similar in substance, at least to the arguments that I make in the book.
The Republican primary is beginning, and you're going to have a lot of debate about China. Mike Pompeo, who many thought was going to run for the presidency, says he's not. Nonetheless, is clearly trying to shape the debate, where he says the United States should recognize Taiwan. That is almost certainly going to trigger a very strong Chinese reaction. What do you think on Taiwan?
Well, listen, this has been an area of policy that's had great sensitivity and strategic significance for more than 40 years. And I think a policy of making sure that America continues to arm the Taiwanese with all the capability they need to make any sort of adventurism on the part of the Chinese, very, very challenging and costly. To have U.S. forces arrayed in such a way that we're demonstrating that we have an ability to support and commit ourselves to Taiwan, and at the same time remaining and continuing to have the policy that we've had since it was put in place by Henry Kissinger of strategic ambiguity. That's a policy that in my mind makes the most sense. So I think we need to have a strong stance, but I think the policy we have is one we should continue.
When we come back, I'll ask David McCormick about the future of the GOP and whether Republicans can and should move beyond Trump. We are back with David McCormick. So you tell a story in the book about how you're running for the Republican primary in Pennsylvania. You want to make sure that Donald Trump just stays out of the race because you're up against Mehmet Oz. You go to see him in Mar-a-Lago. What happens?
Well, I went in to meet with the president with the idea of hopefully him staying out of the primary. I had been told that he was going to endorse my primary opponent, Mehmet Oz. And the president pulled up a couple clips from previous TV interviews I had done before deciding to run for the Senate, where I had not been particularly critical, but I hadn't been particularly favorable about some of the things that the president had said. And then he said to me that he thought to win the election, I would need to say that the 2020 election was stolen. And I said that I wouldn't say that, I couldn't say that. And then he subsequently endorsed Mehmet Oz a couple days later. And listen, when you lose a primary, 1.4 million votes cast by 900 votes, there's lots of things that could have affected it. Obviously, President Trump being opposed to me certainly didn't help me. But there's many, many things that I could have done as the candidate that would have closed that 900 vote gap. So I certainly think that have influenced the election, but I think there's lots of things I could have done to win it.
Republican primary. Donald Trump is the leading candidate by all the polls. Do you think he should be the standard bearer for the Republican Party in 2024?
Well, listen, here's the reality. I think President Trump tapped into an enormous amount of anger in our electorate that I saw on the campaign trail. And that was the thing that struck me most, is that for many Americans, probably half of America, the system hasn't been working for decades. And he tapped into that and channeled that in a very effective way to win the 2016 election. And I try to highlight those ideas in the book that I think need to have the right focus and policy and the right leadership going forward. And I'm not going to opine on a primary other than to say I think for Republicans to win and to lead the country in the right direction, I think they need to have a vision looking forward, a positive vision for how to solve the problems that are affecting everyday Americans. And that's what I'm trying to lay out in the book. I think campaigns looking backwards, not forwards, are not going to be successful. And I think our party, as conservatives and Republicans, isn't going to be successful.
All right. I want to ask you about one part of the book that struck me, which was you say one of our weaknesses in America is that we're teaching American history wrong. Kids don't have pride in their country anymore. And it strikes me, if I can be honest, I think you are here genuflecting in front of a certain kind of conservative conventional wisdom about, attacking the critical race theory and all this. It feels to me like the United States is much stronger for being willing to critically examine its past compared to places like the Soviet Union or China today, where there is only rah-rah nationalist history. It feels like you're advocating we take a page from Xi Jinping's book on how to teach history to these people. Why shouldn't there be critical examination of American history?
Well, first of all, that's not the argument I'm making in the book. The argument I'm making in the book is that we should have an accurate teaching of American history. So the role that America's played in the world, the role it's played in bringing millions of people out of poverty, the role it's played in World War II and liberating Europe from Nazism. So the argument I'm making...
All true, but it also enslaved millions of people, so why not tell both?
I'm arguing for telling both. No, I'm arguing for telling both. I think what's happened, and I think all the numbers would say this is true, that our university system and our secondary school system is not having open debate. It's not actually allowing the entirety of American history or even conservative views being taught in our universities, as another example. So what I'm arguing for is an accurate rendering of history, and I think by any measure, economic, freedom, liberty. America's been a force for good in the world, yet has had dark chapters, and it's been a constant search for a more perfect union. We absolutely need to embrace and stare at those chapters that were dark, and I say so in the book, but we have to put that in the context of America's role in the world. And I don't think this is an area of sort of playing to the politics of republicanism. What happened during COVID is parents actually got a window into how our teachers were presenting American history and also a whole range of other topics to our children, and they found it wanting. And that's why you see parents engaged.
Kids. Do you think your kids have been badly educated? I
think my kid, I have three kids and a fourth headed to college, and I think that colleges today, universities, are very one-sided in terms of the political views that are presented to them. So I don't think, and it's a constant conversation in our house, that they're seeing the other side of the argument. And I think it's a real problem. And as it relates to American exceptionalism, President Obama gave a speech that said, yes, the Greeks think they're exceptional, the Brits think they're exceptional, and we in America think we're exceptional. Well, if you believe that America was unique and that it was conceived in liberty and the pursuit of individual freedom where the government works for the people, we are unique in history, and we need to preserve that uniqueness, that exceptionalism.
Dave McCormick, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Next on GPS, we dig into what the Russians and the Chinese are allegedly doing right here in America to influence those living here. 2 court cases unveiled this week caught my eye. You'll want to hear about those spy cases when we come back.